My name is Alice and I'm 26. I just hung up the phone with my mother, who spent 20 minutes explaining why I should be grateful they're finally acknowledging my existence. Harvard called looking for their most successful alumna, and suddenly I'm family again. Funny how success has a way of making invisible children visible, isn't it? But let me back up, because you need to understand how spectacularly my family failed me before you can appreciate how perfectly I'm about to fail them right back. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely invisible in your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office at Goldman Sachs. Yes, that Goldman Sachs. The irony wasn't lost on me that the family who spent years calling me a boring bookworm was now tracking me down through the most prestigious investment bank in the country. I'm sure they Googled me first, just to make sure I was worth their time. Alice? It's Mom. Her voice carried that artificially sweet tone she reserved for asking favors, like when she needed someone to house sit while they took my siblings on vacation without me. We have wonderful news. Harvard called this morning. Harvard? My alma mater. The place I graduated valedictorian 5 years ago while my family was at a pool party because, and I quote, graduations are boring. But more on that delightful memory later. They're looking for their most successful alumna to give the commencement speech this year. Apparently you're quite accomplished. The way she said accomplished made it sound like she'd just discovered I could tie my own shoes. I set down my pen, watching Manhattan traffic crawl past my 42nd floor window. The same window I'd never mentioned to them, because why would I? They'd never asked about my office, my job, or my life in general. And they called you because? I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear her say it. Well, they couldn't reach you directly. They tried your old number, and when that didn't work, they contacted us as your emergency contact from your student records. At least she was being honest about this part. Novel approach for her. The silence stretched between us like the 5 years of non-communication that had preceded this call. Alice, sweetie, we've always been so proud of you. We've always known you were destined for greatness. I actually laughed out loud at that one. My assistant glanced through the glass wall of my office, probably wondering if I'd finally snapped under the pressure of managing billion-dollar portfolios. If only she knew the real source of my amusement was my mother's attempt to rewrite 26 years of history in a single sentence. Always, Mom? Really? I couldn't keep the amusement out of my voice, because I have some very different memories of my childhood. Now, Alice, don't be dramatic. You know we've always supported your education. Supported. That's a creative way to describe actively discouraging someone from pursuing their goals, but I'll give her points for creativity. Actually, I'd love to discuss that support. But first, why don't you tell me what Harvard really wants? Because in my experience, when my family suddenly contacts me after years of silence, they want something. And it's never my sparkling personality thereafter. Let me take you back to where this all started, because my mother's sudden pride feels a lot less heartwarming when you know the full story. And trust me, once you hear it, you'll understand why I'm not exactly rushing to plan a family reunion. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I was the family disappointment who had the audacity to excel at things that didn't matter to them. While my older brother Jake coasted through high school with C averages, and my younger sister Emma focused on perfecting her social media presence, I spent Friday nights with textbooks and Saturday mornings at academic competitions. Alice, you need to get your nose out of those books and learn to be a normal teenager, Mom would say, usually right before driving Emma to another mall trip or Jake to another party, because apparently reading was a character flaw that needed correcting. The family joke started early. Look, it's our little robot, Dad would announce when I'd ask for quiet time to study. Beep beep, does not compute fun. Jake would laugh and add his favorite nickname, Professor Buzzkill. Even Emma, 4 years younger, learned to roll her eyes when I'd try to help her with homework. God, Alice, you're so weird. Why can't you just be normal? Normal. That became their favorite weapon against me. When I won the state science fair at 16, they were at Jake's baseball game. Not even a championship. Just a regular Tuesday afternoon game. When I received a summer scholarship to a prestigious academic program at Harvard, they were busy planning Emma's Sweet 16 party. The pattern was so consistent you could set a watch by it, and trust me, I started keeping track. Call it my first research project in family dysfunction. Your siblings need our attention more, Dad would explain during our rare one-on-one conversations, which usually happened when he needed me to watch Emma while they went to Jake's games. You're self-sufficient. You don't need us. Self-sufficient. That was their favorite excuse for neglect, dressed up like a compliment, kind of like calling someone too smart for their own good, when you really mean, your intelligence makes us uncomfortable. I learned early that asking for help was pointless. When I needed supplies for school projects, I bought them with money from my part-time tutoring job. When I wanted to attend academic camps, I applied for scholarships because asking my parents felt like begging strangers. When I expressed interest in learning languages or taking additional courses, Mom would wave her hand dismissively. "We can't afford that, Alice. Besides, you need to learn to be a normal girl. All this studying isn't healthy." But somehow they could afford Jake's hockey equipment, Emma's dance classes, and the family vacations I mysteriously never got invited to. Funny how selective poverty works. The public embarrassment was the worst part. At parent-teacher conferences, when my teachers would praise my performance, Mom would actually look uncomfortable. "She's always been a bit intense," she'd say with a nervous laugh. "We keep trying to get her to lighten up." As if my academic success was a social disorder that required intervention. During family gatherings, my achievements became conversation killers. When Aunt Carol asked about my latest award or scholarship, you could literally watch the energy drain from the room. Jake would start making robot noises, Emma would suddenly need to check her phone, and my parents would quickly change the subject to literally anything else. I started declining invitations to these events, which only confirmed their narrative that I was antisocial. The Harvard acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, during my senior year. I opened it alone in our kitchen, my hands shaking as I read the words that would change my life. Full scholarship. Dean's List invitation. Personal congratulations from the admissions committee for my exceptional academic promise and intellectual curiosity. I found Mom in the living room, scrolling through Emma's Instagram photos. "I got into Harvard," I announced, holding up the letter like it was the lottery ticket it essentially was. She glanced up for exactly 2 seconds. "That's nice, honey. Did you see Emma's new post? She got 300 likes already." That was it. No celebration, no pride, no acknowledgement that her daughter had just achieved something most people only dream about. Just a casual, "That's nice," before returning to the truly important matter of Emma's social media metrics. I stood there for a full minute, waiting for the excitement to kick in, for someone to realize what had just happened. But Mom just kept scrolling, occasionally showing me Emma's photos as if I cared about my sister's lunch selfies more than my own future. But you know what? The real betrayal was still coming. And when it arrived, it would make this moment of indifference look like enthusiastic support. Harvard was supposed to be my escape, my chance to be around people who valued intelligence and ambition. And it was, except for one glaring problem. My family treated my departure like an inconvenience rather than an achievement. Actually, scratch that. They treated it like a relief. Move-in day arrived in September. I'd spent the summer working double shifts at a local restaurant to save money for college expenses my scholarship didn't cover. While Emma got a brand new Toyota Camry for her 17th birthday, complete with a red bow and a family photo session, and Jake received a fully funded cross-country road trip to find himself, I was packing my life into secondhand suitcases from Goodwill. "We can't drive you to Boston," Mom announced the week before classes started without even looking up from her coffee. "Emma has a cheerleading camp and your father's taking Jake to look at colleges." Colleges? Jake's grades barely qualified him for community college, but somehow he deserved a father-chaperoned tour, while I was expected to find my own way to one of the most prestigious universities in the world. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. I took a Greyhound bus. 17 hours with 2 transfers and a lunch of vending machine crackers. I'll spare you the details of hauling my belongings across Harvard Yard by myself, but let's just say it wasn't the triumphant arrival I'd imagined. Other freshmen had parents helping them, taking photos, crying with pride. I had a sore back and a profound understanding of just how alone I really was. What I didn't expect was how completely they'd disappear from my life after that. The first month, I called home every Sunday, desperate to maintain some connection to my family. These conversations followed a predictable pattern: 5 minutes about their lives, 30 seconds asking if I was still studying hard, and then an excuse to get off the phone. "Oh, Alice, I have to go. Emma needs help with her homework." Or, "Jake's game is starting soon." Always something more important than talking to their daughter who was somehow managing to excel at Harvard without any support from them. By October, I was calling every other week. By December, once a month. They never called me. Not once. Not even to check if I was alive, had enough money for food, or needed anything at all. Radio silence, except for the occasional group text about family gatherings I was conspicuously not invited to. Meanwhile, social media became my window into their real priorities. Instagram stories and Facebook posts painted a very clear picture of where I stood in the family hierarchy. There was Jake getting a new car, a BMW, because apparently his part-time job at a pizza place required luxury transportation. There was Emma's elaborate birthday party, complete with professional photography and a guest list of 50 people. There were family dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Cape Cod, concert tickets, shopping sprees. And then there were my parents' posts about their wonderful children. Jake's mediocre baseball highlights got paragraphs of proud commentary. Emma's high school theater performances were documented like Broadway debuts. My Dean's List achievements? Crickets. My acceptance into an exclusive research program? Silence. It was like I'd been photoshopped out of their family narrative. The really painful part was seeing how much effort they put into my siblings' lives. Mom would drive 2 hours to watch Emma's tennis matches. Dad never missed Jake's games, even the unimportant ones. They paid for Emma's SAT prep courses, Jake's hockey camp, and both of their college application fees. But when I mentioned needing money for textbooks during one of our rare phone calls, Mom's response was immediate. "Oh, honey, you've always been so good at managing money. I'm sure you'll figure it out." Translation: you're not worth the investment. The abandonment wasn't just financial. Thanksgiving sophomore year broke something inside me permanently. I'd spent weeks planning my trip home, excited to share my latest academic achievements, and maybe, finally, get some recognition for my hard work. I arrived home to find my room converted into Emma's walk-in closet. "Oh, that," Mom said when I asked about my displaced belongings. "We figured you wouldn't mind. You're hardly ever here anymore, and Emma really needed the space." My childhood bedroom, with its built-in desk where I'd done homework for 12 years, was now a shrine to my sister's shopping habits. My books were boxed up in the basement. My awards and certificates were nowhere to be found. Even my bed had been replaced with a clothing rack. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, genuinely confused. "The couch is comfortable," Dad said from his recliner, not bothering to look up from his newspaper. "Or there's always the basement if you want privacy." Have you ever experienced that moment when you realize your own family sees you as disposable? Comment below if you understand that particular brand of heartbreak. I lasted 2 days before taking the bus back to Harvard. I spent the rest of Thanksgiving break in my empty dorm, eating cafeteria turkey and pretending I didn't care that my family was celebrating without me. Again, junior year was when I stopped pretending my family cared about my existence. But the journey to that realization was more painful than I care to remember, filled with repeated attempts to connect with people who seemed determined to reject me. I kept trying to go home for holidays, clinging to some fantasy that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time they'd be interested in my life, my achievements, my thoughts. Maybe this time I'd finally get the family connection I desperately wanted. I was wrong every single time. Christmas of sophomore year was particularly brutal. I arrived home excited to share that I'd been selected as a teaching assistant for Professor Martinez's behavioral economics course, an honor typically reserved for graduate students. I'd prepared stories about my research, my classes, the incredible professors who were mentoring me. The moment I walked through the door, the criticism started. "Oh, Alice," Mom said, looking me up and down with obvious disapproval. "What are you wearing? That sweater makes you look so serious. And your hair? When's the last time you did something fun with it?" I was wearing a navy blue cashmere sweater and dark jeans. Perfectly normal clothes, but apparently not fun enough for Mom's standards. "I think I look fine," I replied, which was apparently the wrong answer. That's exactly the problem. You think everything's fine when it's not. You need to learn to care about your appearance. How are you ever going to find a boyfriend if you dress like a librarian? Because naturally, finding a boyfriend was more important than the fact that I was excelling at one of the world's most prestigious universities. The worst part was how they treated my speech. I'd spent 2 years surrounded by brilliant people who engaged in sophisticated conversations about economics, philosophy, and literature. I'd learned to articulate complex ideas, to use precise language, to engage in intellectual discourse. To my family, this was apparently a character flaw. "There she goes again," Jake would say whenever I tried to contribute to a conversation, using her $50 words. "Hey, Professor Buzzkill, can you translate that for us normal people? You don't have to sound so smart all the time," Emma added with genuine annoyance. "It's like you're trying to make us feel stupid." The irony was that I wasn't trying to make anyone feel anything. I was just speaking naturally, the way I'd learned to speak at Harvard. But to them, my vocabulary was an attack, my intelligence an insult, my education an accusation. Mom was the worst offender. "Alice, honey, you need to learn to talk like a normal person. Nobody likes a show-off. All these big words and complicated ideas. It's exhausting. Can't you just have a simple conversation?" I started monitoring my speech, dumbing down my thoughts, choosing simpler words. But it was never enough. Even when I tried to match their conversational level, they found ways to make me feel wrong. Too serious. Too intense. Too much. The family dynamics had crystallized into clearly defined roles. Jake was the golden boy whose potential everyone had to nurture and protect, despite the fact that his potential seemed to involve drinking beer and playing video games. Emma was the social butterfly who needed constant support and validation for her increasingly superficial pursuits. And I was the family weirdo whose presence disrupted their comfortable dynamic. During holiday gatherings, when relatives asked about college, Jake and Emma would share entertaining stories about parties and friends and campus drama. When it was my turn, I'd mention my research or academic achievements, and you could literally watch the interest drain from people's faces. Uncle Bob would nod politely and immediately change the subject. Aunt Carol would find an excuse to refresh her drink. My parents would look embarrassed, as if my success was somehow socially inappropriate. "She's always been different," Mom would explain to relatives with a nervous laugh, too serious for her own good. "We keep trying to get her to lighten up, but you know how some kids are." Even now, years later, the memory of those conversations makes my chest tight. They weren't celebrating my achievement, they were apologizing for them. By the end of junior year, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity. I stopped going home for holidays. I volunteered to help with research projects during Thanksgiving break. I stayed on campus for Christmas, telling them I had too much work to do. Spring break became an opportunity for extra study rather than family time. "Alice is becoming so antisocial," I overheard Mom telling Aunt Carol during one of her phone calls. "All she cares about is school. It's not healthy for a young woman to be so isolated." Antisocial. Because choosing meaningful work over family dysfunction is apparently a character flaw that requires intervention. The distance I'd created was protection, but it also gave me clarity. I could see our family dynamics with brutal honesty for the first time. I was the responsible child who required no maintenance, the convenient scapegoat for their collective dysfunction, and the uncomfortable reminder that maybe they weren't as smart or successful as they liked to believe. My grades reflected my focus. Dean's list every semester, research positions that other students fought for, professors who started mentioning graduate school possibilities, academic opportunities that opened doors I'd never imagined existed. And through it all, radio silence from home. No congratulations, no interest, no pride. By senior year, I'd built a new definition of family, one that included my professors, my study group, my research colleagues, people who valued intelligence, celebrated achievement, and treated knowledge as something precious rather than threatening. But sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about these things. Sometimes it waits until you've given up on people before showing you exactly who they really are. Senior year brought two life-changing events: my selection as class valedictorian and my family's most spectacular display of indifference to date. If you thought their previous neglect was impressive, just wait. They were about to set a new gold standard for parental disappointment. The valedictorian announcement came in March. Harvard doesn't make this decision lightly. It's not just about grades, though mine were certainly strong enough. They consider leadership, research contributions, and overall impact on the academic community. I'd spent 4 years building something meaningful at this institution. Editor of the Economics Review, teaching assistant for 3 different professors, research that was being cited by graduate students across the country. The dean called me personally to deliver the news. "Alice, this is an extraordinary honor. In my 20 years here, I've rarely seen a student contribute so much to our intellectual community. Your speech will set the tone for your entire graduating class." I should have been thrilled. Instead, I felt a familiar emptiness, because I knew exactly how this news would be received at home. Or rather, how it wouldn't be received. I called them anyway, one last attempt at connection. "Mom, I have some huge news." "Oh, hold on, honey. Emma's trying to decide between 2 prom dresses and I promised to help. This is such an important decision. Can you call back later?" I hung up without leaving a message. Later never came, by the way. It never does in my family when it comes to my achievements. I tried again the next day. "Dad, I got selected as valedictorian." "That's great, sweetheart. Hey, did your mom tell you Jake got accepted to state? We're so proud." His grades weren't perfect, but they saw his potential. State. Community college. They were prouder of Jake's acceptance to a school with a 90% acceptance rate than they were of my selection to represent Harvard's entire graduating class. The real knife twist came when I realized they had no plans to attend my graduation ceremony. I found out by accident, 3 weeks before the ceremony, when Emma posted an Instagram story about her amazing prom dress shopping day with Mom. The date was circled in pink highlighter, May 15th, the same day as Harvard commencement. I called immediately. "Mom, Emma's prom is graduation weekend." "Oh, is it? What a coincidence." Her tone was so casual I almost believed she hadn't noticed. "Graduation is May 15th. I'm giving the commencement address. You know, as valedictorian." "That's wonderful, honey. But Emma's prom is the same day. And Jake has a tournament that weekend, too. Your father and I can't be in 2 places at once. My graduation from Harvard. The day I would represent my entire class in front of thousands of people, delivering a speech I'd spent months crafting. the culmination of 4 years of work that had transformed me from a neglected teenager into a confident young woman. And they were choosing my siblings' routine high school events instead. Graduations are just ceremonies, Dad added when I expressed disappointment. The important thing is the degree. You'll get that either way. Besides, you've never needed us there before. Never needed them. Their favorite excuse, dressed up like independence when it was really abandonment. But the humiliation wasn't finished yet. 2 weeks before graduation, I realized I needed something to wear for the ceremony. Something special for the most important day of my academic life. Mom, I need help finding a dress for graduation. Something appropriate for giving the speech. Oh, Alice, we just don't have the money right now. Jake's tournament requires new equipment, and Emma's prom dress was more expensive than we planned. You understand? They didn't have money for a graduation dress for their valedictorian daughter, but they'd just bought Jake a $300 hockey stick and Emma a $400 prom dress. The math was pretty clear. I wasn't worth the investment. Maybe you can find something at a discount store, Mom suggested helpfully. You're so good at finding bargains. I hung up and sat in my dorm room, staring at my laptop screen. In 2 weeks, I'd be standing in front of Harvard's most distinguished alumni, professors, and trustees, delivering a speech that would be remembered for years. I'd be representing not just my class, but the university itself, and I had nothing to wear. My roommate Sarah found me crying at my desk that night. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears of exhaustion and disappointment. What's wrong? She asked gently. I told her about the dress situation, about my family's priorities, about feeling completely alone on what should be the proudest day of my life. Sarah disappeared into her closet and emerged with a beautiful navy blue dress still in its dust cover. My sister bought this for her law school graduation last year. She's about your size. Please, wear it. I tried to refuse, but Sarah wouldn't hear it. Alice, you've helped me with economics homework for 4 years. You've listened to me cry about boys and stress and everything else. You're giving the freaking valedictorian speech at Harvard. You deserve to look absolutely stunning. That night, trying on Sarah's sister's dress, I realized something profound. I'd found more support from a roommate I'd known for 4 years than I'd ever received from the family I'd known for 22. The dress fit perfectly. In it, I looked like someone who belonged on that stage, someone whose words mattered, someone worthy of respect and admiration. I just wished the people who'd raised me could see me the same way, but they wouldn't be there to see me at all. Graduation day dawned beautiful and clear, one of those perfect May mornings that makes Boston feel like the center of the universe. I woke up in my dorm room for the last time, surrounded by packed boxes and 4 years of memories that no one from my family had witnessed or cared to hear about. My roommate Sarah's parents had arrived 3 days early, along with her grandmother, 2 aunts, and her younger brother. They'd taken us to dinner at expensive restaurants, toured the campus like proud tourists, and treated me with more warmth in 72 hours than my own family had shown me in 4 years. Sarah's mom even helped me with my hair and makeup, fussing over me like I was her own daughter. Are you sure your folks aren't coming? She asked for the 10th time, genuine concern creasing her features. I just can't imagine missing this moment. They have other commitments, I replied, the same diplomatic lie I'd been telling everyone who asked. Because the truth, that my parents chose a high school prom and a community college baseball tournament over my Harvard valedictorian speech, was too pathetic to say out loud. Getting ready felt surreal. I put on Sarah's sister's beautiful dress and my cap and gown, adjusting my graduation cords and honor society stoles. In the mirror, I looked like someone who belonged on that stage, someone whose words would matter, someone whose achievements were worth celebrating. If only the people who'd raised me could see it that way. Walking to the ceremony, I was surrounded by families everywhere, mothers crying with pride, fathers beaming at their accomplished children, grandparents who'd traveled cross-country for this moment, siblings holding homemade signs with encouraging messages and inside jokes. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to our family group chat. About to give my speech. Wish me luck. Then I waited and waited. 20 minutes passed without a response. The graduates were arranged alphabetically, which put me near the front due to my last name. Perfect view of the audience. Perfect opportunity to scan the crowd for familiar faces that I knew wouldn't be there. But some pathetic part of me kept looking anyway, hoping they'd surprised me, hoping they'd realized at the last minute how important this was. They hadn't. My phone buzzed just as we were taking our seats. I glanced down to see a response in the family group chat. Mom, we're all at Cousin Tommy's pool party. So much fun. Graduations are so boring anyway. Good luck, sweetie. I stared at that message for a full minute, reading it over and over. They weren't just missing my graduation. They were actively celebrating somewhere else, dismissing the most important day of my academic life as boring. The casual cruelty of it, the complete lack of awareness, the smiley face emoji at the end. It was almost artistic in its obliviousness. 22 years of being their daughter, and this was what I was worth to them. A throwaway text between pool party activities. But you know what? In that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt transformed into something cleaner, sharper, clarity. When they called my name as valedictorian, I walked to the podium carrying a speech I'd rewritten 3 times, trying to find words that would honor this moment without revealing the emptiness I felt. I looked out at 2,000 proud family members and felt completely alone, and then I began to speak. I talked about resilience and self-determination, about finding your own path when the world tries to diminish your dreams, about the difference between being alone and being independent, about building something meaningful with your own hands and your own mind when no one else believes in your vision. Success, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent crowd, isn't about proving yourself to people who refuse to see your worth. It's about recognizing your own value and building a life that reflects it. I never mentioned my family specifically, but I could see in the faces of some students and parents that my words resonated with their own experiences of feeling unseen or undervalued. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. 3 minutes of thunderous applause for a speech that came from the deepest, most painful place in my heart. Professors wiping their eyes, students cheering, parents nodding with recognition and understanding. In the receiving line afterward, person after person stopped to shake my hand. That speech changed my perspective, said one father. My daughter needed to hear those words, said another. A professor emeritus told me it was the most powerful commencement address he'd heard in 40 years. But my phone stayed silent. No congratulations from the people whose opinion had once mattered most to me. That night, at the graduation dinner Sarah's family had insisted on including me in, her father raised his glass for a toast. To Alice, he said, for reminding us all that the strongest people are often those who've learned to stand on their own. Your family should be incredibly proud. Should be. Should. Those words echoed in my mind as I finally checked my phone later that evening. Still nothing from my family. Not a single message acknowledging my speech, my achievement, or my existence. But I did have 17 missed calls from Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, and other firms who'd heard about my speech and wanted to discuss employment opportunities. Apparently, some people recognized value when they saw it. That night, lying in my childhood bed for what I knew would be the last time, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity and definitely changed my life. I was done. Done trying to earn love that would never come. Done accepting crumbs of attention while watching them feast on my siblings' mediocrity. Done pretending that blood relations meant anything when there was no actual relationship to speak of. From now on, I would build my life with people who chose to be in it, not people who felt obligated to tolerate me. And you know what? That decision felt like the first breath of fresh air I'd taken in 22 years. After graduation, I had 7 job offers waiting for me. Goldman Sachs was the most prestigious, but there were also opportunities at McKinsey, 2 different tech startups, and a think tank in Washington, D.C. Not bad for someone whose family couldn't be bothered to watch her graduate, if I do say so myself. The Goldman Sachs offer was extraordinary. 6-figure starting salary, signing bonus, and a fast track to one of the most competitive training programs in finance. The kind of opportunity that most Harvard graduates would kill for. The kind of news that normal families would celebrate with champagne and proud phone calls to relatives. I accepted the offer without consulting anyone. Why start now? The funny thing was, for the first week after graduation, I kept expecting someone from my family to ask about my plans. Surely they'd be curious about where their freshly graduated Harvard valedictorian daughter was planning to go with her life. Surely someone would want to know if I'd found a job, where I was living, whether I needed help with the transition. Nope. Radio silence. Complete and utter indifference to my future plans. Meanwhile, their social media feeds were full of updates about Jake's community college orientation and Emma's summer internship at a local boutique. Photos of family dinners I wasn't invited to, weekend trips I wasn't included in, group texts I wasn't part of. It was like I'd graduated from college and simultaneously graduated from their family. Fine by me. 2 could play that game. I spent 2 weeks apartment hunting in Manhattan, using my signing bonus to secure a beautiful 1-bedroom on the Upper East Side. While my Harvard classmates were moving back home with their parents or finding roommates to share expenses, I was setting up my own space in one of the most expensive cities in the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter they'd always called too expensive and too demanding was now financially independent, while their golden children were still living off the parental payroll. Moving day came and went without a single text from my family. I hired professional movers, set up my utilities, furnished my apartment with grown-up furniture instead of the college dorm aesthetic I'd been living with for 4 years. I was officially a New Yorker, working for one of the most prestigious firms in the world. And my family had no idea. The first month at Goldman was intense but exhilarating. 12-hour days, complex financial models, high-stakes client meetings. I was working alongside some of the smartest people I'd ever met, solving problems that actually mattered, making decisions that affected real money and real businesses. My colleagues became my social circle. We'd grab drinks after work, complain about impossible deadlines, celebrate successful deals. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who valued intelligence and ambition, who saw hard work as admirable rather than antisocial. 2 months in, I got my first performance review. Exceptional. Top 5% of my cohort. Fast-tracked for early promotion consideration. I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. Still nothing from my family. Not even a, "How are you settling in?" text. 3 months passed before curiosity got the better of me. Were they even wondering where I was? Did they care if I was alive? Had they noticed I'd disappeared from their lives as completely as they disappeared from mine? I decided to test the waters. I posted a photo on Instagram, my first social media post in months, showing the Manhattan skyline from my office window. No caption, no location tag, just the view from the 42nd floor of one of the most recognizable buildings in the financial district. Within an hour, I had likes and comments from college friends, high school acquaintances, even some relatives I barely knew. "Wow, Alice, amazing view. So proud of you. Living the dream." From my immediate family, nothing. Either they weren't following my social media, which would be typical, or they simply didn't care enough to comment. Either way, the message was clear. 6 months into my New York life, I realized something profound. I was happier than I'd ever been. Not because I was proving anything to my family, but because I'd finally stopped trying to. I'd built a life based on my own values, surrounded by people who appreciated my mind and respected my achievements. I was making more money than my father had ever dreamed of. I was working on deals that made the business news. I was building expertise in an industry that fascinated me. And I was doing it all without a single word of encouragement or support from the people who'd raised me. But here's the thing about building a life without your family's support. It makes you incredibly strong, but it also makes you incredibly vulnerable to any sign that they might actually care about you. Which is probably why, when they finally contacted me after almost a year of silence, I was stupid enough to hope that maybe they'd changed. What do you think finally made them reach out? Genuine concern for my well-being, or something else entirely? Let me know your guesses in the comments, because I guarantee you won't see this next part coming. 8 months into my new life in New York, I made what turned out to be a catastrophic decision. I decided to give my family one last chance. Not to rebuild our relationship, I wasn't that naive, but to retrieve some personal belongings I'd left behind and maybe, just maybe, have one honest conversation about our past. I still had some books at home. My most treasured collection, including first edition novels I'd saved up to buy, and the complete works of Shakespeare that my grandmother had given me before she died. These weren't just books. They were pieces of my history, my intellectual development, my relationship with the one family member who'd actually understood me. I drove up from New York on a Saturday morning, not bothering to call ahead. If they were home, fine. If not, I had my old key and knew where they kept the spare. I'd grab my things and leave. Simple, efficient, minimal contact. The house looked exactly the same. Same faded paint on the shutters. Same overgrown garden that Dad kept promising to maintain. Same collection of family photos in the hallway where my presence had always been conspicuously minimal. I let myself in and called out, "Hello? Anyone home? Alice?" Mom's voice came from the kitchen, carrying genuine surprise. "What are you doing here?" She appeared in the hallway, looking older than I remembered, wearing the same confused expression she'd worn my entire childhood whenever I required attention. "I came to pick up some of my things," I said simply. "My books, mainly. The ones I left in my old room." Mom's face did something complicated. A micro-expression that lasted maybe half a second, but I caught it. Guilt? Panic? Hard to tell. "Oh," she said carefully. "About that? I thought you knew." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Knew what? We had a yard sale a few months ago. To raise money for Emma's wedding. We sold some old things that weren't being used anymore. What old things? Just books, mostly. Some furniture. Things that were taking up space. The words hit me like a physical blow. "You sold my books? Just the ones you left behind, honey. We figured if they were important to you, you would have taken them to college." I stared at her, processing this information. They'd sold my books. My grandmother's Shakespeare collection, my first edition Austen novels, the poetry books I'd annotated in high school, the philosophy texts that had shaped my thinking. "Mom," I said slowly, "those were my most treasured possessions. The Shakespeare set was from Grandma. Some of those books were irreplaceable. Well, you should have said something. Her tone was defensive now, as if this was somehow my fault. How were we supposed to know they were important? They were just sitting there collecting dust. Just sitting there, collecting dust. 22 years of my life, and my mother had just described my most precious belongings as dust collectors. How much did you get for them? I asked, though I already knew the answer would make this worse. Oh, not much. Maybe $50 for the whole lot. Books don't sell well at yard sales. $50. My grandmother's final gift to me, my carefully curated personal library. Years of intellectual growth and discovery. Sold for the equivalent of a dinner out. We put the money toward Emma's engagement party, Mom continued, apparently not recognizing the magnitude of what she'd just confessed. She was so happy with how it turned out. That was it. The final straw. The moment when something fundamental broke inside me. Not with pain this time, but with perfect, crystalline clarity. Where do you think I've been for the past 8 months? I asked quietly. Mom looked confused by the change of subject. At Harvard, I assumed. Or maybe you moved back to Boston? I live in New York now. I work for Goldman Sachs. I make more money in a month than Dad makes in a quarter. Her eyes widened slightly, but not with pride. With something that looked almost like resentment. I graduated from Harvard valedictorian, I continued, my voice steady and calm. I gave a speech that people still talk about. I had 7 job offers. I've built an extraordinary life. I paused, letting that sink in. And you sold my books for $50 to pay for Emma's engagement party. Alice, if we'd known... Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended. Just stop. You've spent my entire life making it clear that I don't matter to you. This is just the latest example. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time any of you called me? When's the last time you asked how I was doing? Do you even know where I live? What my apartment looks like? Whether I'm happy or struggling or successful or lonely? The silence stretched between us. I thought so, I said finally. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to leave now. I'm going to go back to my life in New York. And you're all going to continue pretending I don't exist, just like you have been for the past 8 months. Alice, you're being dramatic. The only difference, I continued as if she hadn't spoken, is that now I'm going to stop pretending you exist, too. I walked toward the front door, then turned back for one final statement. For the record, I'm doing incredibly well. Better than I ever imagined possible. I have an amazing job, a beautiful apartment, and wonderful friends who actually value me. I've built exactly the life I wanted. I paused at the door. No thanks to any of you. And with that, I walked out of their house and out of their lives. The drive back to New York felt like a liberation. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't carrying the weight of their potential approval or disappointment. I wasn't wondering what they thought of my choices or hoping they'd finally recognize my worth. I was free. Free to build the life I wanted with people who actually wanted to be part of it. Free to stop wasting emotional energy on people who'd never valued me. Free to finally understand that family isn't about blood relations. It's about the people who choose to show up for you. And my biological family had made their choice very clear. 5 years of blissful silence. 5 years of building a life based on my own values rather than their dysfunction. 5 years of proving to myself that I could thrive without their approval, acknowledgement, or presence. And what a 5 years it had been. My career at Goldman Sachs exploded beyond my wildest dreams. I was promoted twice, managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and earned recognition as one of the most promising young analysts in the firm. My colleagues respected my intelligence, my clients trusted my judgment, and my superiors saw me as partnership material. I bought a stunning apartment on the Upper East Side, not just the 1-bedroom I'd started with, but a genuine 2-bedroom with hardwood floors, crown molding, and a view of Central Park. I furnished it with beautiful pieces I'd chosen myself, art that spoke to me, books that reflected my interests rather than what someone else thought I should read. I traveled to places I'd dreamed about since childhood. Tokyo for business, Paris for pleasure, the Greek islands for my 30th birthday. I dated wonderful men who treated me with respect and admiration. I made friends who valued intelligence and ambition, who celebrated my successes rather than feeling threatened by them. Most importantly, I built a chosen family of people who actually showed up for me. Sarah from college became my closest friend, moving to New York for law school and staying for her career. My colleagues became my social circle. I had mentors who guided my professional development and friends who supported my personal growth. In short, I built the life I'd always wanted, surrounded by people who chose to be in it. The silence from my biological family was complete and honestly, refreshing. No guilt-inducing phone calls, no passive-aggressive comments about my lifestyle choices, no demands for emotional labor or financial support. Just blessed, peaceful silence that allowed me to flourish. Occasionally, I'd wonder what they were up to. Social media provided glimpses. Jake had eventually graduated from community college and was working at a car dealership. Emma had married her college boyfriend and was posting endless photos of their suburban life. My parents looked older in photos, grayer, but their social media presence remained focused on their perfect children and their grandchildren to be. They never mentioned me, not once in 5 years. It was as if I'd been completely erased from their family narrative, which, given their behavior, was probably for the best. I stopped checking their social media after year 3. What was the point? I had my own life to live, my own successes to celebrate, my own future to build. By year 5, I'd achieved something I'd never thought possible. Complete indifference to their opinion of me. I didn't need their approval because I had my own sense of worth. I didn't crave their attention because I was surrounded by people who gave me all the positive attention I could want. I was genuinely, authentically happy. Which is probably why, when my assistant knocked on my office door on that Tuesday morning in October, I wasn't prepared for what was coming. "I'm sorry to interrupt your client meeting," Jessica said, "but you have an urgent family call on line 2. My stomach dropped immediately. Family emergency calls at work could only mean one thing: someone was dead. It was the only scenario that would prompt them to contact me after 5 years of complete silence. I excused myself from the conference room and picked up the phone in my office, bracing for the worst. "Alice? It's Mom." Her voice sounded breathless, excited in a way I'd never heard before, not grief-stricken or panicked. Excited. "Is someone hurt?" I asked immediately, because nothing else would explain this call. "What? No. No one's hurt. We have incredible news." Incredible news. From the family that had spent 5 years pretending I didn't exist. "Harvard called this morning," she continued, her voice practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "They were looking for you. Apparently, you're their most successful alumna from your graduating class." I sat down heavily in my chair. "Harvard. After all these years. They want you to give this year's commencement speech," Mom rushed on. "Can you believe it? They called you their most accomplished graduate. We had no idea you were so successful." Had no idea. Of course they didn't, because in 5 years, they'd never once bothered to find out what I was doing with my life. "And they called you because?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Well, they tried to reach you through several channels, but when those didn't work, they found our contact information in their alumni database as your emergency contact from college," which meant Harvard had exhausted their normal methods of reaching me and had resorted to calling my family. The family I'd specifically excluded from my life for very good reasons. "Isn't that wonderful?" Mom gushed. "We always knew you were destined for greatness. We always believed in you, even when you were so focused on your studies that you forgot about family." The revisionist history was breathtaking, as truly artistic in its complete disconnect from reality. "We're so proud of everything you've accomplished," she continued, "and we think it's time we celebrated your success as a family." As a family. These people who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years suddenly wanted to celebrate my success as a family. But here's the thing about being emotionally healthy and having genuine self-worth. You can spot manipulation from a mile away. And this reeked of self-interest wrapped up in fake sentimentality. Still, some pathetic part of me, the part that had spent 22 years craving their approval, felt a tiny flutter of hope. Maybe they'd genuinely realized what they'd lost. Maybe they actually wanted to rebuild our relationship. I was about to find out just how naive that hope really was. They wanted to meet for dinner. To celebrate, Mom insisted, though something in her tone suggested this celebration came with conditions attached. "It's been too long, Alice. We miss you. Miss me." After 5 years of radio silence, they suddenly missed me. How convenient that this sentiment coincided with discovering my professional success. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them at a restaurant in Boston. Neutral territory where I could leave whenever I wanted, and public enough that they'd have to maintain some semblance of civility. I drove up from New York on a Saturday afternoon, curiosity outweighing my common sense. They were already seated when I arrived at the upscale restaurant I'd suggested, the kind of place my Goldman Sachs salary could afford without thinking twice. Mom, Dad, Emma, and Jake. All together for the first time in 5 years, looking like the perfect American family they'd always pretended to be when it suited them. "Alice!" Mom stood up as if we were long-lost relatives reuniting after decades. "You look wonderful. Doesn't she look wonderful, everyone?" The enthusiasm felt performative, rehearsed, like they'd practiced this reunion in the car ride over. I sat down and ordered a glass of wine, studying their faces. Dad looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding direct eye contact. Jake seemed bored, checking his phone periodically. Emma kept staring at my clothes, my jewelry, my watch, probably calculating how much everything cost. Only Mom maintained the theatrical excitement. So, Dad began after the obligatory small talk about my apartment and commute. This Harvard speech is quite an honor. It is, I agreed, taking a sip of wine that probably cost more than their entire meal. We've been telling everyone, Emma added, suddenly animated. My friends are so impressed that my sister is Harvard's most successful graduate. I had no idea you were so accomplished. Of course she didn't, because in 5 years, none of them had bothered to find out what I was doing with my life. We've been doing some research, Jake said, setting down his phone for the first time all evening. Goldman Sachs is like really prestigious, isn't it? You must make serious money. There it was, the real reason for this reunion. Not love, not pride, not genuine interest in my well-being. Money. The thing is, Mom continued, reaching across the table to pat my hand like we were close. We've been thinking about everything you've accomplished, and we realize we haven't been as supportive as we should have been. Here comes the performance, I thought, watching her face carefully. We were young parents, Dad added, his voice carrying what I assume he thought was heartfelt regret. We made mistakes, but we've always loved you, Alice. Always been proud of you. We always knew you were brilliant. Mom chimed in, her eyes bright with what looked like genuine emotion. Even when you were little, we could tell you were special. Remember how you'd read those thick books? How you'd win all those academic competitions? For just a moment, one pathetic, hopeful moment, I felt something flutter in my chest. Recognition, acknowledgement, the validation I'd craved my entire childhood. We always believed in you, Dad added, nodding earnestly. We knew you were destined for greatness. We didn't know how to show our support. The words I'd waited 27 years to hear. They'd always believed in me. They'd always known I was special. They'd always been proud. Really? I heard myself ask, and I hated how small my voice sounded. Of course! Mom's smile was radiant. We've always told people about our brilliant daughter, haven't we, everyone? Emma and Jake nodded in agreement, though their expressions suggested this was news to them too. For about 30 seconds, I let myself believe it. I let myself imagine that maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe they had been proud but just bad at showing it. Maybe this was real. And then Mom delivered the line that shattered that fantasy completely. Now that you're so successful, she said, her voice taking on a different tone, we think it's time for you to give back to the family that invested so much in you. It's time to show some gratitude for everything we did to help you get where you are. The words hit me like a slap across the face. Investment. Gratitude. Give back. What exactly are you asking for? I said, my voice flat. They exchanged glances around the table, clearly having rehearsed this part too. Well, Dad began carefully, Jake is thinking about graduate school, but student loans are so expensive these days. And Emma and David want to buy a house, Mom added. But they need help with the down payment. Your father and I are getting older, Mom continued, and retirement planning is challenging. We've sacrificed so much over the years. I stared at them, processing what was happening. They'd lured me here with fake pride and manufactured affection, then immediately moved to the real agenda. My money. You invested in me, I repeated slowly. Of course we did, Mom said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. We drove you to school every day. We encouraged your studying. We supported your education. We believed in you when no one else did. The revisionist history was so outrageous it was almost impressive. They'd turned years of neglect into sacrifice, indifference into support, abandonment into investment. We never asked for anything back then, Dad added, because you were just a child. But now you're successful, and family helps family. Family helps family. From the people who'd spent 5 years pretending I didn't exist. I started laughing. Not the polite chuckle you give at a mildly amusing story, but genuine, from the belly laughter that made other diners turn to look at our table. What's so funny? Emma asked, looking genuinely confused. You, I said, still laughing. All of you. This whole performance. Their confident expressions began to falter. My laughter filled the restaurant, drawing stares from other diners and making my family look increasingly uncomfortable. But I couldn't stop. The sheer audacity of what they were attempting was almost artistic in its brazenness. You invested in me, I repeated, wiping tears from my eyes. That's absolutely fascinating. Let me share some memories of your investment. Their confident expressions were cracking, uncertainty creeping in around the edges. When I needed supplies for school projects, I bought them with money from my tutoring job because asking you was pointless. When I wanted to attend academic camps, I applied for scholarships because you couldn't be bothered to support my interests. When I got into Harvard, Harvard. You couldn't even manage basic enthusiasm. Alice, that's not how we remember it, Mom said weakly, her theatrical warmth beginning to evaporate. Oh, I'm just getting started, I continued, my voice remaining calm while my words grew sharper. Let me tell you how I remember your investment. I remember taking a Greyhound bus to Harvard because driving me was inconvenient. I remember eating vending machine crackers for lunch because family activities didn't include me. Dad shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact. I remember spending every holiday alone at college because coming home meant being criticized for how I dressed, how I spoke, how I dared to use big words that made you uncomfortable. I remember my siblings calling me Professor Buzzkill, and my mother telling me I needed to be more normal, less intense, less myself. Emma was staring at her plate now, probably remembering her own participation in making me feel unwelcome. But here's my favorite memory, I said, leaning forward slightly. Graduation day. The day I was selected to represent my entire Harvard class as valedictorian. Where were my devoted, supportive parents who had always believed in me? The silence at our table was deafening. That's right. You were at Cousin Tommy's pool party because, and I quote, graduations are so boring. I stood on that stage, representing one of the world's most prestigious universities, and gave a speech to 2,000 people while my family was splashing around in a swimming pool because my achievements were too tedious to witness. Mom's hand fluttered to her throat, a nervous gesture from my childhood. And after I graduated, I continued, when I moved to New York to start my career at Goldman Sachs, did any of you call to see how I was doing? Did anyone ask if I needed help settling in? Did anyone show even passing interest in my life? Jake was now actively scrolling through his phone, probably wishing he could disappear into it entirely. 5 years, I said, holding up my hand. 5 years of complete silence. No birthday calls, no holiday texts, no how are you doing check-ins. Nothing. Until today, when you discovered my success could benefit you financially. We never helped you because you never needed us, Dad said desperately, trying to salvage their narrative. You were always so independent, so self-sufficient. You're absolutely right, I said with a smile that felt sharp as a knife. I never needed you, because you made it very clear from early childhood that needing you was pointless. I learned to be self-sufficient because you gave me no other choice. But we're family, Emma said quietly, speaking for the first time since the conversation had turned serious. No, I said firmly. Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. Family doesn't ignore their children for years and then show up demanding gratitude and money. Family doesn't sell someone's most treasured possessions for $50 to fund a party. Mom's eyes widened. She'd forgotten about the books. Oh yes, I said, noting her expression. I know about my grandmother's Shakespeare collection, sold at a yard sale for $50 to help pay for Emma's engagement party. My most precious belongings, including the last gift from the only family member who ever truly loved me, traded for pocket change. The restaurant suddenly felt very quiet around us. You want to know what your investment actually was? I asked, pulling out my phone. Let me show you. I opened my banking app and turned the screen toward them. Not my balance, that would have been cruel, but my recent charitable donations. This month alone, I donated more money to scholarship funds than you spent on my entire childhood. I've endowed a program at Harvard that helps first-generation college students. I've funded academic competitions for kids who, like me, find their worth in intellectual achievement rather than popularity. I put my phone away and leaned back in my chair. That's what actual investment looks like. Supporting people's dreams, believing in their potential, celebrating their achievements. You did none of those things for me. We made mistakes, Mom said, tears forming in her eyes. But they looked more like frustrated tears than genuinely remorseful ones. You made choices, I corrected. Deliberate, consistent choices to prioritize my siblings over me, to dismiss my achievements, to make me feel unwelcome in my own home, to abandon me when I needed support most. I stood up, placing enough cash on the table to cover my wine and then some. Here's what's going to happen, I announced. I will be giving that speech at Harvard, and it will be about the importance of building your own life when the people who should support you choose not to. It will be about finding strength in solitude and success in spite of the obstacles others place in your path. Mom's mouth opened as if to protest, but I held up my hand. You spent my entire life making me feel like I didn't matter. Congratulations. You succeeded so completely that I built an extraordinary life without needing your approval. I don't owe you anything except maybe a thank you. A thank you? Dad asked, looking confused. For teaching me that the only person I can truly depend on is myself. For showing me that family is what you build, not what you're born into. For proving that sometimes the greatest gift neglectful parents can give their child is the motivation to never be like them. I picked up my purse and jacket. Enjoy your dinner. And enjoy continuing to pretend I don't exist, because that's exactly what I'm going to do with all of you. As I walked toward the restaurant exit, I heard Mom call out desperately, "Alice, wait, we can work this out." But I didn't turn around. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. Some relationships aren't worth salvaging. Some people don't deserve access to the life you've created without them. I had everything I needed: meaningful work, genuine relationships, and the unshakable knowledge that I'd earned every success through my own effort and determination. Most importantly, I had peace. The kind of peace that comes from finally understanding that you were never the problem. The Harvard commencement speech was delivered to 8,000 people on a perfect June morning, exactly 6 months after that disastrous family dinner in Boston. I looked out at the audience filled with proud families and felt genuinely happy for every graduate who had people there cheering for their achievements. Unlike my own graduation 5 years earlier, this time I wasn't scanning the crowd hoping to see familiar faces. I knew exactly who was in that audience. People who had chosen to be there. People who valued education and achievement. People who understood that knowledge and personal growth are gifts worth celebrating. My speech was about self-reliance and the courage to define your own worth when others refuse to see your value. I talked about the difference between being alone and being independent. I discussed the strength that comes from building something meaningful with your own hands and your own mind. Success, I told the graduating class, isn't about proving yourself to people who refuse to see your worth. It's about recognizing your own value and building a life that reflects it. It's about understanding that the family you choose is often more important than the family you're born into. I shared stories of resilience without self-pity, of triumph without arrogance. I talked about the professors who became mentors, the colleagues who became friends, the chosen family that had supported my journey in ways my biological family never could. Some of you may have parents in this audience who sacrificed everything to see you succeed, I said, watching the crowd. Cherish them. Some of you may be first-generation college graduates whose families don't fully understand your achievements but love you anyway. Honor that love. And some of you may be here today with no family support at all, having built your own foundation through sheer determination. You are not alone, and you are not less than. The standing ovation lasted longer than my own graduation speech had, but this time it felt different. This wasn't applause for personal achievement. It was recognition of a universal truth about resilience, about the human capacity to thrive despite obstacles, about the power of choosing your own path. After the ceremony, I was approached by hundreds of people. Parents who promised to do better by their own children, students who felt inspired to pursue their dreams despite family discouragement, fellow graduates who shared their own stories of building lives independent of family expectations. But the conversation that meant the most came from Dr. Rodriguez, my former economics professor, who had become a mentor and friend over the years. "Alice," she said, pulling me aside, "that speech will change lives. You've turned your pain into purpose, your struggle into strength. That's the mark of true leadership. Purpose. Strength, leadership, words that defined not what I'd overcome, but what I'd become." As I drove back to New York that evening, my phone buzzed with congratulatory texts from colleagues, friends, and former classmates. Real relationships built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Not a single message from my biological family, and for the first time in my life, that silence felt like a gift rather than a rejection. I had built something beautiful from the ruins of their neglect. I had taken their abandonment and transformed it into independence. I had turned their indifference into self-reliance and their criticism into confidence. Most importantly, I had learned that love isn't about blood relations or obligation. Love is about choosing to show up for someone, celebrating their victories, supporting them through challenges, and believing in their potential even when they don't believe in themselves. My chosen family, Sarah, my colleagues, my mentors, my friends, had given me more love and support than I'd ever received from the people who'd raised me. They'd proven that family is what you build, not what you're born into. 3 years later, I'm sitting in my home office, which overlooks a garden I planted myself, herbs and flowers that thrive under my care, books that reflect my interests and aspirations, photos that show genuine relationships and real achievements. My phone occasionally lights up with notifications, but I've long since blocked the numbers that once had the power to hurt me. Unknown numbers go straight to voicemail, and familiar ones get the attention they've earned through consistent kindness. The wall beside my desk displays my Harvard diploma, photos from my travels, awards from my firm, and a framed copy of that commencement speech. Not because I need constant reminders of my success, but because they represent something more valuable than achievement. They represent the life I chose to build when I stopped waiting for permission to be myself. Sometimes people ask if I ever regret cutting ties with my family. The answer is always the same. You can't regret losing something you never really had. You can't miss support that was never offered, love that was never given, or pride that was never felt. What I have instead is something more precious: the absolute certainty that every good thing in my life was earned through my own effort, chosen by my own values, and built with my own hands. No one can take credit for my success because no one else contributed to it. I sleep well at night knowing that the woman I've become is entirely my own creation, and if that's not the greatest victory of all, I don't know what is. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Remember, the family you choose is often more important than the family you're born into. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well without the people who tried to make you feel small. Sometimes the greatest victory is walking away and building something beautiful from the freedom that choice provides. Trust yourself. Build your own foundation. Choose people who celebrate your light instead of dimming it. You deserve nothing less than genuine love and authentic support. And if you can't find it where you were born, don't be afraid to create it where you choose to live.